Mike at West End Motorsports here with another episode of our Mikey Motorcycle Podcast. And this one's going to be another solo episode for you. Today we are going to cover some news we got from Indian. It looks like there's 2025 models were just released last week. And there is actually some exciting stuff coming from them, which I'm pretty pumped about. Obviously, Harley still dominates the market, but as an up-and-comer, it's up to Indian to do some different things. And I think if you go back and look at the conversation that Professional Monkey and I had a couple weeks ago, it looks like, I'm not saying they listened to us because clearly this was all in the works, but it looks like Indian's doing some of the things that we actually talked about. And so I'm pretty pumped to see that type of thing. We're also going to cover the question, which many of you already know the answer to, which is, should you trust your dealer? And like I said, it's pretty straightforward, but honestly, there are a lot of people out there that are going to the dealers for the first time or dealing with them for the first time and dealing with them for the first time on not just buying the motorcycle, but also on accessorizing your motorcycle. So it's going to be a little bit of a two-parter as far as when you should trust your dealer, etc. And so let's get right into it. So we've got 2025 Indian models. It looks like the big news is all coming about this Scout 101, which is a pretty sweet little setup. So, for anybody out there who follows Indian closely, the Scout has been a really, really productive and really good potential bike. Like they've sold a healthy number of those units. Obviously, Indian is competing with Harley. Also, contrary to a lot of the talk and hype out there, Indian is not in Harley territory yet as far as units sold, money made, or any of those things, but they are making a heck of a run out of it. And I see constant sort of improvement from them year over year and really sort of working their product line towards what people in the industry really want. And without being the anti-Harley as far as like doing things that people don't want, they do a really good job of addressing the gaps that Harley customers and V-twin riders in general want that Harley just ignores, is unwilling to meet, or just doesn't see it. I'm not exactly sure why Harley Davidson has these sort of long-term issues that are constant, that everybody knows about that has their motorcycles, but they just don't address them. They're getting better and better too, I think, over time, with the new leadership there. I've been pretty impressed, and I see them working in a lot of directions, but sometimes they do seem to create several new problems by eliminating one, which I guess is pretty normal. You see that all across the board in every industry from a lot of different big companies and stuff. But Indian continues to sort of chip away, I think, at what Harley does, and doesn't seem to be selling out their core sort of marketing platform or their core branding. And so they just kind of keep adding to it and keep making tweaks that are not wholesale changes, but they just keep adjusting. And I think that if they continue to do that, they're going to continue to be a really good competitor for Harley, which is great because, every company needs competition to make them better. And so, this was the ultimate promise of Indian, of players buying Indian when they did back in, was it 13, 14? I think the 14 models were the first to come out, so 13 or so. Maybe it was 12. By the time they came out, it was 14. But the ultimate promise of that was, at least for me, to see Harley have a legitimate competitor in their exact vertical, in their exact segment, right? Which is big, heavy V-twin cruisers. And so far, Indian's done that. Of course, there's been missteps along the way, but Harley's had, probably more missteps in the time frame that Indian's existed. And so they still carry on. So they've just got ground to make up here, and they're doing an incredible job. So it looks like, as far as that goes, the big changes are on the Scout platform. And so what we see is the Scout Rogue is out, the Scout Sport is in, and basically replaces it with a couple of minor adjustments. So, you can still get that, I believe, in a 60 and the new 1250, it looks like. Yeah, so we got a 1250cc, so they increased the motor on all these Scouts. They had 100 horsepower before. Now that bumps them up to 105 stock. you still see the torque side of the Scout engine is on the lower end, so you're at 82 foot-pounds. Now this is a light bike, so 105 horsepower and 82 foot-pounds is a lot. We have a Scout bobber that we've done some promo stuff on. My experience with that bike is you feel 105 horsepower and 82 foot-pounds riding a bike. It doesn't feel torquey. You've got a lot of high RPM output, and if that's what you're looking for, that's great. You know what I mean? So if you're not looking for that roll-on power, then there's absolutely no problem with it at all. If you like turning higher R's and stuff, you can definitely get that out of the Scout, and that's what it's designed to do. So I mean, there's zero problems with that. If they came out with a 105 horsepower, 82 foot-pound Chieftain, that might be a problem, because the heavy touring guys don't want to have all horsepower and no torque, right? That's the thing that you want when you're dealing with a heavy bike. You want to have torque, you want to have roll-on power so you can pass a truck, hit a hill without downshifting and all that stuff. Scout's a little bit different. It's more aggressive, so that horsepower to torque ratio being the way that it is I think perfectly fine. You don't hear a lot of people complaining about it. And so they've got some new models here. The big one being this 101, which is basically a sort of souped up Scout cafe racer type of thing, which is really cool. And in a minute, I'll share my screen so we can go look at those together here. But the big thing for me when I look at it, everybody's got their things that they look at. And as a consumer, you may have things that you're looking at the Scout that stand out to you. But obviously my lens and the purpose of this podcast in general is basically we're always talking about stuff through the aftermarket accessory customization lens, right? And so when I look at what Indian's problems have been as far as customization, it's been inconsistency in the models. We also see this across the board on almost all Polaris platforms with side-by-sides and stuff. They change stuff from year to year. Nobody knows. There's minor model changes that nobody knows about. A great deal of inconsistency and a lack of uniformity. A pet peeve of mine personally, a lot of times I think that the lack of uniformities that manufacturers employ is pointless, expensive, and it's just it makes it difficult for the end user to really do what they want, and because we're dealing with most of what we deal with is in the want business, right? Most of you guys who are out there customizing your bikes, you're doing it because you want to, right? And so to have a bike that's easy to customize is actually not something that factors in until after you have the bike, right? So there are a lot of you out there, I know this, who have had maybe your first bikes you bought thinking, okay, well, I could do this. I've got 4 or 5 things I'd like to do to this bike. Maybe you bought it used or whatever. And then you go to start to do stuff, start to put the parts on that you want, to start shopping for the parts that you want, only to find out that there is nothing that's made for it because there wasn't enough of them. There were, and when enough of them, I mean out in the market in general, right? So they maybe were only existed. You've got a 1 model year bike essentially where it was changed the next year, or 2 model years, and it just didn't really have the numbers out there to create the demand to make whole series of parts, from exhaust to seats, whatever. Usually you'll see the big stuff come in on something like that, but not, the little parts. And so one thing that we've seen from Indian, especially when it comes to the Scout, is some minor changes like a couple years ago. This is COVID time, so, maybe they had no choice, but the outlet diameter on their head pipes increased maybe 1/8 of an inch. Nobody knew about it. It didn't matter for a lot of the slip-on manufacturers, but for some of them it did because they had a tighter tolerance. And so that's the kind of stuff that makes it hard. And that doesn't just make it hard on the aftermarket industry, but it makes it hard on the user because you're you're buying products, finding out the hard way. You're seeing stuff that doesn't fit and having a hard time getting it when you first make that purchase of the motorcycle and you want to do all those things. There's always that handful of stuff that you're going to do right away when you buy the motorcycle, or pretty much right away. And so when there's no parts available, you can't do that. And so Indian has made this move towards uniformity on these bikes where all of the Scouts have the same frame, looks like the same exhaust, which is pretty exciting, and a lot of the same components. And they're not all the same, obviously. There are areas where they're different, but they're almost entirely the same. The motors are the same, the frame mounts are the same. So what you're going to see, which is awesome, is now instead of having to build, let's just say, a crash bar for a Scout bobber, Now you can build that for every single Scout model. So however many Scout models they sell in totality for 2025, the parts that the aftermarket company makes is going to be in demand for all of them, which is fantastic news for you if you're considering buying one of these models. That's awesome. It's going to take a while. Obviously, now we've got a new model year, so the 2025 models aren't going to take the same parts as the 24 models, right? So we do lose several years of consistency that we had in certain specific models, but we're going to gain in the long run. And so if you're just looking at a 2025, know that there is going to be, down the road, better aftermarket support for these bikes than there was for the previous models. And I think that's cool. They've got a lot of power. This is what we talked about with Professional Monkey when we were talking about platform bikes. These new Scouts are going to be awesome platform bikes, which is a bike that you could buy and you can customize. You know, the price point is good. They're not dirt cheap, but if you look at some of the Scout 60 models, I mean, they are pretty inexpensive, you know, and so that's exciting. If you want to get into customizing bikes, you're looking for your first bike to do something with where, you know, you're not going to break the bank and you can make it into something that's pretty cool. I think Indian really just smoked it with these 2025 models. And so I'm really happy to see something like that. Again, this is my bias. But I do feel, you know, just in talking to people over 20 years, you know, being able to do these things to your bike is part of the reason that you buy a motorcycle. You know, you don't, in our industry, in the heavy V-twin industry, if you're buying a V-twin motorcycle, you didn't buy it to keep it stock 9 times out of 10. There are those handful of guys that love the bike the way that it is and they're not touching a thing, but you're going to do something to accessorize it. This isn't like buying your car or anything, or your truck or whatever, where most of us leave it stock. It's the exact opposite. Most of us are touching it, changing it, doing what we want to it. And so it looks like Indian really is going to give us a good platform for that. One of the big things is obviously going to be exhaust. So there's going to be no current exhaust available for 2025 models, at least when they first come out and start hitting the street. So if you have a 2025 or you're getting into 25 and you're watching this, you know, there's not going to be stuff. I can tell you that we will definitely have it up on the website as soon as our manufacturers start to produce stuff for it. I don't know, and I haven't been able to find if the cat is in the head pipe on these bikes or not. They have changed the exhaust. So it looks like everything's going to a 2-in-1. Matter of fact, let's do our little screen share here and let me show you what we got to work with here. So we're going to jump in, and right here we've got, so one thing, I'm on Indian's website here now. One thing I don't really care for is that they don't actually tell you that what model year you're looking at when we do this. And so it just shows this is 23 lineup, and then we're on 2024 and 25 lineup. So obviously they've still got some 23 bikes left over, which means somebody ought to be able to get a screaming deal on those. And then you've also got 24 models, which would be left over shortly, and then the up and coming 25s, and they mix them together. I don't really like that. If I'm in the market for a 2025 as a consumer, if I'm in the market for a 25, I don't want to see the 24s. If I want to see the 24s, I'll click on the page with them, right? So I'm not really looking for that. But here we are. We're just going to blow through these FTRs because they're cool. I don't have demand for them. If you guys have them and like them, I'd love to know what the feedback is on them. I don't really get a lot. I think they've got some really neat ideas here. I just don't know if these are real market movers. And we're going to move right to the Scout that we're talking about here. And as you can see on our page, just from a customization perspective, what do we got? Same head, same pipes, same pipes, same pipes, same pipes. So at some point here, you'll be able to buy a single slip-on, which should be fairly inexpensive, that you could put on any of these models. I'm guessing the catalyst is in here. Generally, when we see manufacturers design these pipes and they're doing a 2-in-1 or something like a 2-in-1, it is for emissions control essentially. And so I'm imagining that we're going to see a cat probably in here until somebody can confirm that for me. We don't know, but I'm guessing that's what you're going to see. When you have this big collector, it doesn't make much sense to put the cat in the muffler. And that's going to be really cool because that means that you could put a slip-on, if that is the case. You should be able to put a slip-on on this thing, and you're going to remain EPA compliant. Whether or not you're California CARB compliant is an entirely different conversation for an entirely different day. That's exhausting and I'm sick of dealing with, so I don't want to talk about it anymore. But realistically, your catalyst will remain, so there should be nothing preventing you from doing that. If that is the case, which means no tuning. So again, an easy customization, right? We like to make big changes cheaply and efficiently. So if we can get big differences all at once and we don't have to break the bank to do it, that's a good thing, right? Especially if you're not sure if you want to do a full system, you're on the fence about, maybe you don't want to remove the catalyst depending on your state or whatever. This is going to give you options, and options are good, right? We like options. And so you see the full lineup here. Essentially, this is the new 101 Scout, which everybody's pretty excited about. Honestly, I think styling wise, that thing is sharp. Truthfully, I'm not the biggest fan of the Scout Classic personally. I think it almost hits the mark, but it does. There's something about it for me that just doesn't hit it quite right. I've never been quite sure what it is, but it's just there's something about the aesthetics and the proportions to me that is missing, right? I think it gets better when you look at something like the Super Scout. So if I was looking at the Scout Classic, I might consider the Super Scout. Obviously, there's a fair bit of price difference there for a set of saddlebags, and I know that there's other differences, but just at first glance, the fender's different. The handlebars appear to be the same. Comes with a passenger seat. Do you need to spend $3,000, $2,500 to do that? That's up to you. The exhaust is different here, but if you're changing the exhaust isn't different, but the muffler is different. If you're changing slip-ons anyway, who cares? You could easily achieve that. I'm sure somebody will come out with a black and chrome option. So not much there for us to work with as far as a difference in price. I mean, there's a lot for us to work with. That's wrong. But, is that price difference worth it to you? I don't know. You compare that $500 difference from the Super Scout to the 101 Scout. Obviously, these things have completely different purposes. This is aggressive. This is eye-catching. That's a runner, man. I mean, that thing looks like a lot of fun to ride. I know that there's different suspension on there. I think I saw somewhere that there's different brakes. If you are looking for a better in-detail breakdown of these, I just watched a video from Moto Bob that was really good. There's a guy named Ridge Runner who did a pretty solid video as well. So those are really good explainers. Generally, I find the manufacturers to be pretty lacking in this kind of stuff. I also saw, before I did this video, went through several other videos that were absolutely useless. One guy's just sitting on the bike and talking about it, which does me I don't know. It's got a lot of subscribers though, so somebody's watching, I guess. I don't get it. Anyway, carrying on here. We've got the other models here. So the Sport Scout is also new. That has replaced the Scout Rogue. That's kind of like a really good platform bike if you're looking to get something. Same for the bobber, man. $13,000, you get a bobber. All these bikes are going to have the same handlebars, so we're going to see all new handlebar options come available. You get that Scout bobber, you can start doing stuff to it pretty much right away once the parts are there. And you're not going to have to do a lot to make it really neat, and you're talking about a healthy amount of power. So you could do that. You compare the Sport Scout to the 101. It's like, yeah, you're not getting a paint job. Yeah, you're not getting the front end. But aesthetically, you might look at that and you go, hey, that's close enough. I could work with this. And so I think that's where you're going to see a lot of our customers are probably going to come from the Sport Scout. One other thing to consider when you look at these Scouts, when you look at prices here, I think that if you're shopping for a motorcycle and you saw the Scout and it caught your eye, I do think that you should maybe just pump the brakes for a second and take a look down at the Chiefs. Obviously, they're more expensive. It's a different motor. This is more of your traditional V-twin with push rods and all that stuff. So if you're sort of pursuing more of an old school, real V-twin kind of sound, you're going to get more of that out of the Chief than you are out of the Scout. The Scout motor in itself can be a really good sounding motor, but it is different. You're not going to have, you don't get that lopiness to it, that old school sound, just to be vague here without getting too specific, but that old school kind of sound, you're not going to get that out of the Scout. You can get that out of the Chief and Chieftain models and all those models that have the Thunderstroke motors. Okay. So, Obviously that's not everybody's concerns, but it is some people's concern, and it should be something that factors in because I could tell you that our Scout, I know that if you're a Scout owner and you have pipes on it and you like the sound, that's great. It doesn't do it for me sound wise. It just, to me, it's a little bit more, it's an overhead cam bike. So like, they sound a specific way, just like Harley's V-Rod did. And it's not a knock on it. If you like it, I think that's great. We've certainly got pipes that make it sound better than stock. There's no doubt about that. It's just, it's not the kind of sound that's in my head that I grew up with that to me sounds like, old school custom sound, right? But if you don't care about that, then rock and roll, man. That's all good. Everybody's got different preferences, so that's awesome. So just something to consider. I think the cheapest of the Chiefs is the Chief model itself. 15 grand for a full-size touring bike that you can kind of build onto. Now, there's not piles and piles of accessories for the Chief. I'd like to see that do better. I don't know what's preventing it from doing that. The price point's good. I think that as time goes on and these models remain consistent, the aftermarket can support it a little bit better. We do really well with a lot of the Dean Speed makes some awesome products for it. And so, they do really well. And so, but still, I'd like to get more phone calls about stuff for the Chief than we do. And we're trying. So if there's something out there that you like, that you've bought for your Chief or whatever that you'd like to see us carry, or you just really recommend, by all means, chuck it in the comments, email us. We love to know that stuff. We want to carry what people want. So that's all good. So that's pretty much it. And I know, if we're just going to run through this real quick, you've got your Super Chiefs, which are basically Heritage competitors, right? That's your competitor to the Heritage Softail. Similarly priced, similarly outfitted, solid little bikes. Run down into the Springfield, which I love. I love hard bags and a windshield. That's your Road King competitor. Similarly priced, maybe a little bit cheaper. I really don't remember where the Road King was priced at, but it's right in the ballpark. Absolutely competitive on that front. Beautiful bikes, classic Indian styling if that's what you're after. Coming down, the Chieftain, still great. Awesome platform for a touring bike. That's your Street Glide competitor. Looking good there. Price still good there. The Indian Challenger, which is, truth be told, a little bit different. Looks like a Road Glide, but this does not have a pushrod motor. So, you're getting a little bit different sound out of those, even though they do actually take a lot of the same. Those slip-ons, I believe, are the same from the Chieftains and up. So, there you're getting into a little bit more of a performance-minded bagger with less of the old school hang-ups that a lot of the bikes have. But, those old school hang-ups sell too. So Indian has got options for you that, basically for every sort of potential V-twin motorcycle buyer. They've got something for you. Come down to the Roadmaster, which is basically just full-blown ultra limited competitor, electric glide competitor. Great options there. You've got the classic fender styling, newer fender styling if that doesn't fit the bill for you. Got the Roadmaster Elite, and then the Pursuit, which is kind of like a Road Glide Ultra. And so, really, if you're looking at Harley models, you can also look at Indians too. And you should really just consider it. If you're a Harley guy, you're a Harley guy. There's not going to be much that we could do to change that. And I'm not trying to either. I don't care what you buy, as long as you buy your parts for it from us. That's all good. But, they've got a lot of really good options here. So definitely shouldn't be something that you sleep on. The big problem with Indian, which is going to get us into our next question here, is the same thing that we've dealt with Indian for absolutely forever, which is dealerships, and so not everybody has a dealership anywhere near them, and that could be really impractical. Our closest dealer here is about 2.5 hours away. If I bought a new Indian motorcycle and I wanted to take it in for regular service and stuff, would I do that? No, I wouldn't. I just don't. I can't deal with that. I don't have time to drive 5 hours to get a bike service and then have the wait time of the service itself, or drop it off. Then you're talking 10 hours round trip back and forth twice. So that's their thing. But you can't get the dealers everywhere until you have the market demand for it. So it's a double-edged sword. It does limit it. We saw some dealers come and go. Obviously there were dealers that came around in the beginning that were hot to trot, and some of those have sort of gone away. And that's going to be something that you continue to see. There's growing pains. Nothing goes up in a straight line. And so, but maybe you've got if you're in a metropolitan area, or, a major city, or not even, or a minor city, you've probably got one pretty close to you. And so Indian should definitely be on your radar. If you're a young kid out there and you want to get a bike, you want to get your first bike, I think it's an awesome platform. There's some safety features on the newer models that can be added for a fee. And then there's the base models, which I think is great to always have a base model, so that people can get entry into the market if you want to. So really, honestly, positive stuff to say about Indian. I think they're doing great things, and I think we'll continue to see them chip away at Harley's lead, which is really the way to, in my estimation in business, to have long-term success. So they're not going to come in and wipe out Harley. That's never going to happen. But if they can keep chipping away, it's really good for all of us, for riders, for the industry in general, and for the manufacturers too. You got to have competition to make yourself better, so you're not getting stagnant. So trust me, as a guy who's competing with larger companies all the time, it just takes up a lot of my bandwidth, and I like to see what they're doing. It's the same thing that we try to do, which is basically not what the big company is doing, but also not the complete opposite either. Right? We do a lot of little things that they won't do, because we're willing to, and so that's always good for an up and comer, and I think it's smart in my opinion. But I don't know. What do I know? Anyway, so the other question that we had, that we wanted to jump into this episode is here. Should you trust your dealer? This is your Harley dealer. This is your Indian dealer. You could even talk about your car dealer, but really what we're talking about here is when your dealer is trying to sell you accessory parts, when they're selling you your motorcycle. And I can't tell you over the course of 20 years how many guys have been given the old, hey, we'll throw this into the loan. We're going to give you everything you want, because you don't actually know what you want. You know that you want some sort of aftermarket parts on your bike, right? You know that you want mufflers. You may know that you want a seat. You may want some chrome upgrades, or sort of just, what we'd call like an aesthetic upgrade. But you haven't spent any time on it. All you've done is looked at this bike, and maybe you looked at one other bike in the dealer that had those things. And so your sample size is absolutely tiny, right? And the dealers love to do this because they get to pile it into the loan. And guess what? You get to pay interest on your parts for the length of your loan, which is awesome, right? Not really. So what you will find more often than not when you're dealing with the dealers and the parts departments at the dealers, this is of course a rule, and there are of course exceptions to this rule. That's true of absolutely everything you deal with in life. So I don't want to beat that dead horse too much, but you guys need to judge your dealer. If you know what you want and your dealer is willing to get it to you quickly, or get you what you want, and they're not trying to force you down some rabbit hole, well, that's then that's great. There are good dealers out there. It's just that most of them do the same thing, which is that they try to push on to you what they want to sell and not what you want to buy. And this ties into our video that we did about how to screw up when you're buying exhaust for your bike. This is exactly the same thing. It's important for you to know what you want to buy. And if this is your first bike, if it's your first Indian Scout, if it's your first Indian Chief, and you have no idea what pipes sound good on there, or what seat works well, or what seat fits you, well, guess what? You're going to buy a ton of parts wrong. You're going to buy a ton of parts that you need to sell separately, that you're going to be paying interest on for the length of your loan. So, should you trust your dealer? Only as far as you could throw them, and that's up to you to gauge and to decide when you're doing these types of things. Should you trust your dealer when he tells you things about installing parts on your motorcycle, and that only they can do it, or your warranty is going to be voided? Absolutely not. If you hear that from a dealer, stop dealing with them like yesterday. Okay, that's a lie. It's illegal. They're not supposed to do it. Harley Davidson dealers just got in trouble about a year or two ago for doing that. It is strictly illegal, but big companies and small companies and people in general will do what they're not supposed to, as long as they can get away with it. Okay, and as long as you let them get away with it, they will run roughshod over you, and it will cost you money. Okay, and you can take that principle and you can apply it across all different things. I'm not here for life advice, but it's something that we deal with absolutely regularly. It's a question I answer several times a day, every day for, I don't remember when the dealer started that particular line of bullshit, but it was probably 15 years ago. So don't believe it. If your dealer tells you that you have to use them for anything, they cannot do that. And if you provide just the littlest bit of pushback, you're going to see them back off real fast. And if you don't believe me, try it out, because it happens, man. If they can't do it, and if they know that that what they're doing is wrong, then you'll see them back up pretty quickly. So anyway, that's it for this one, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching, stay tuned. We do have more videos coming your way. We're getting this thing off the ground and up and running. If there's anything you like or don't like, please tell us. We want to make this thing better and want it to suit you. Obviously, we're going to continue to broadcast and communicate through the lens of the aftermarket industry, specifically within the V-twin segment. And so if there's anything you're interested in or you'd like to know about, or some stuff that's on your radar, by all means, share it with us, comment, email, whatever. We really appreciate it, and hope you guys all have a great day. Thank you for watching.